Range Rover common issues, in particular the L405. Heck, we hear enough about them. But what exactly are they? Buying a used car, in particular high value or luxury cars with poor reliability reputations, can be a bit of a minefield. So let's flip the lid off of exactly what some of those common issues are. Let's start with the big ticket item under here. And the chances are, if you're in the market for one of these or you own one, you're going to be very familiar with exactly what this is. It is the crankshaft, which I know is down the bottom of the engine, but we've got a lot of plastic to look at here. In fact, we can see the crankshaft pulley there. Now, these engines, the 3-litre V6 diesel in particular, the root cause of this is bad tooling. The casts they use to make the crankshafts, over time the tolerance is slipped, and these have oil starvation issues due to those big end bearing seals not fitting correctly around the running face of the crankshaft. Over time that leads to hot spots, and over more time that can lead to snapped crankshafts, and it is a prolific issue well known to the 3-litre V6 variant of this car. Now, there are things you can do to mitigate this. Not driving everywhere thinking that you are Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, for example, in a 3-ton Luxo barge does help, puts less strain on all of those internals. And not to state the obvious, regular servicing does help. It stops with fuel dilution in the oil, which is the worst enemy of an internal combustion engine's oil. Now, should the worst come to the worst, a new engine in one of these will set you back, materials only, for a used engine, anywhere from £8,000 to £10,000. That's quite the price tag. Add fitting on top of that, you're going to be running into 12 to 15 quite comfortably. If you go direct to Land Rover for a new engine, you're not going to be walking away with any change out of 30k. So it does help to look after these and be mechanically sympathetic. Whilst we're talking about things under the bonnet here, it's also worth talking about the alternator. These cars are renowned for alternators failing. When they do, shuts down the system for 1 hour, it goes into some protection mode, and it will drain the battery. Now, AGM, augmented glass matte batteries, don't do well to being fully depleted, so the chances are if your alternator goes, you're not going to be able to use your car for an hour. You're going to need a new battery as well as an alternator. So check the health of that. You can get testers that will test alternators. I've got one, I use it semi-frequently. Check that that alternator is in good health if you are purchasing one of these cars. Save yourself the cost of an alternator and a battery. Next up on our list is the air suspension. Now, this car has an incredible amount of range of motion on the air suspension. We are only halfway up. This is normal driving mode. If you go up another setting here, as we are now, into off-road mode, you've got a heck of a range of motion on that suspension. It does come with its downsides. Getting out without these side steps here is a bit of a drop, but then you wouldn't really be driving around in this mode all of the time. And Land Rover have combat this issue with this button here, which is access mode, which when you press, the car will drop down, allowing ease of access. That's all well and good, but what if I don't really just want to be driving around on jacked up suspension? What's the point of air suspension? Great question. Because each wheel is individually suspensioned, whatever you want to call it, by an airbag around a damper, there are no roll bars. So each corner of the car is independently controlled by air suspension in real time, and you can see on the screen in the car the live dynamics for that. But what it makes for is a much smoother, much more comfortable ride with a lot more configuration. And under the boot here, you will see, under the protective covering for the spare wheel if you have one, the air compressor, and that's what that black thing is in the centre of the spare wheel. It, unsurprisingly, compresses air for the suspension. Now, all of those component parts, as we spoke about in the reliability video, it's not just as straightforward as standard suspension. And the law of averages will tell you the more there is to go wrong, the more will go wrong. So on these cars, people do report issues with the air suspension system, especially as they get older. Things like airlines corrode. You've got an alley body with steel pipes or copper pipes mounted against it. They're going to corrode. They're not going to hold air anymore. How often have you seen an old Land Rover driving around a bit squat as if one corner's collapsed? That's exactly what's happening there. Next up is electrical gremlins. We've all had them. Perfect example in JLR products. I had four-wheel drive unavailable come up on the dashboards. Now, all four wheels were in fact there, but it had gone into two-wheel drive only and limp mode. And I'm thinking, oh, how much is this going to cost? You know, what's gone wrong now? What module's broken? What hardware's broken? Nope, none of that at all. All I needed to do to clear the warning light off the dashboard was charge the battery. Yep, ridiculous, isn't it? I charged the battery and it got rid of the warning light off the dashboard. Why was that? These cars are, for lack of a better term, electronically highly strung. Everything is adjustable by electrics, headrests, all of the windows, obviously, mirrors. You've got adjustable electronically steering wheel. You've got dimming mirrors here, there, there. You've got electric blinds with wave sensors to shut the blinds. You come in the back, you've got full infotainment control from the back here. You can control the blinds. You've got electronically adjustable seats, 4-zone climate control. The list goes on. And that CAN bus system is constantly doing health checks on itself. And if it gets a reading back that isn't in good health, i.e. your battery is below the optimum 12.4 volts, it throws a wobbly and it just doesn't know what to do, and you get all kinds of weird and wacky problems come out of it. The car might start, there's enough juice in the battery to start it, but you get these strange issues. So before you go shelling out chasing expensive electrical problems around your car, give the battery a charge. It doesn't cost anything, it might save you bacon. So we've done engine, we've done suspension, we've done electrics. Let's talk about transmission, the drivetrain. These cars run, depending on the age and the engine type, an 8 or 9 speed ZF gearbox controlled by what they call the hockey puck here. It's not like in the F-Type where you've got the gear selector, you've got this hockey puck that rises up. And the characteristics of that gearbox change depending on what drive mode you're in. In this car, you've got a lot of off-road settings you wouldn't have in, for example, my F-Type. You've got dynamic mode, comfort mode, eco mode, and it changes the characteristics and effectively the map on that gearbox depending on your driving mode. In this car, it will do things like lock differentials, lock axles, permanent four-wheel drive, all of that jazz. But anybody that owns a slightly older Range Rover or Land Rover product will tell you over time those gearboxes get slow, they get sloppy, and they're a pain. These cars run what's called a Haldex system. It's how they move power between the front and rear axles under driving. And if they're not serviced, and don't get me wrong, they are sold as a sealed for life unit, if such thing does exist. But if they are not serviced frequently, they gloop up, they get slow. Perfect example being Mrs. GB's got an Evoque, and that thing is now 11 years old this year. The gearbox in that just leaves so much to be desired. You could honestly go make a cup of tea between switching from drive to reverse. It takes so long. I'm exaggerating a bit. We've probably got like a 3 or 4 second delay, but when you're manoeuvring, trying to do a 3-point turn in the road, it's less than ideal. Transmission issues in themselves, things like gearboxes going bang, relatively unheard of. It's a ZF gearbox. It's a very well tried and tested gearbox that's put in so many road going cars. They're not unheard of course they're not. But if they're looked after properly, sympathetically, well maintained, you shouldn't have too many issues. And something we mustn't overlook on these is just how easy they are or have been to steal. That is a common issue and a consideration that you need to take when you're buying one of these. I've done a whole video on that. I'm not going to dive into it here. Go and check that out if you haven't already. But that is something that needs to be considered when purchasing one of these cars. Now, you also get things such as air conditioning issues a lot of people talk about, and that is down to much the same as the suspension. that pipework corroding and letting the refrigerant gas out the system and no longer working. In addition to that, these cars rattle and clunk. Dear God. When we moved the suspension up and down earlier, if you were to adjust the height from where you left it parked, come out of park, all of that suspension has moved and twisted and you get a big bang as the handbrake comes off. A little bit embarrassing to have that kind of noise come out of this car if you've got people with you or around you. And the interior doesn't half rattle. Anybody who hangs around for my cutscenes at the end of the video will see what I was saying about the rattles in this car. But then we also need to remember, what's this, a 2018 model, it's 7 years old this year. Any car that's done 50,000 miles on a road will have been shaken about and rattled down a bit and will develop some rattles of its own. So bear it in mind, it's a consideration, but I think you do well to get any car without that amount of rattles in it. Now, this video is not me bashing the Range Rover. I love it. I own one and I do love it, but I want to be able to share the things that I found when I was buying this car. You know, what are the common issues, what to look out for when you're on the forecourt of a dealership? What should you be checking? What should you be asking for? Ask those questions. If they can't get answered truthfully and honestly, move on to the next car. There's so many of these about. You need to know you're buying something that you feel is good value for money, it's been well looked after, and it's going to serve you well. Now, the next consideration is how much is 1 year of owning one of these going to cost me? Now, I've done a video on that. Go and check it out if you haven't already. I break down and peel back all of the costs I've incurred, and I've also done my reliability, exactly what this car has been like in 1 year of ownership, what's gone wrong, what's gone right. But that's it for another video, guys. If you're not already, please do sub by hitting that button down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. I promise I do wash my cars. This is disgusting. This is what 2 days of driving on UK roads in the winter looks like. It's filthy. I promise I do take care of it. I just can't be washing my car 3 times a week. I don't have time for it.